They tell you the crisis is about Iran, but behind closed doors, decisions are already being made. Power is shifting, lines are being drawn. And this is the Middle Ground Mike.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Middle Ground, Mike. Obviously, we got one of our favorite guests, if not our favorite guest on here, Ron B. We're going to talk Iran. It's not loud right now, but it is to the people who are paying attention. Talks are happening in Oman. The forces are positioned. And Israel is now trying to lobby us in Washington, D.C. Ron, thanks for coming on. What's going to happen next if this pressure breaks?
Well, that's a great question, and good to be with you as always, Joe. And thanks for having me. Yeah, it's a crucial time for Iran, especially the Iranian people have the most at stake. They're the ones getting murdered in the streets. In fact, any number we don't know, somewhere between 10 and 30,000 have been killed, and another 40,000 have been arrested. And their prospects are probably not very good either, because what does Iran do in these situations? Since 1979, they usually kill their way out of the problem. And so this becomes very interesting because Iran is at its weakest point in 46 years because of its economy, because of a 5-year drought, because the people are fed up, and because they're spending all of their money on missiles and nuclear facilities that could go into a diversified economy to help their own people. And so it's a particularly crucial time to determine whether or not to attack Iran on behalf of the protesters. But you notice the discussion about that has shifted away from the protesters to nuclear weapons. And so you heard, well, help is on the way. Well, what sort of help is on the way? And if you've had somebody die in the streets, you're going to say, well, what kind of help that's going to help us? But the fact of the matter is, you have to be very careful in the Middle East in particular, because there's so many countries involved and there's so many interests involved, economic, political, and military. In June, we attacked their 3 nuclear sites, and I believe the president said we obliterated them. But it appears that they've put some tarps over them and may be rebuilding. And in fact, at Natanz, I've seen independent satellite photos that suggest that they have been dumping sand over all the entrances to Natanz, which is the Los Alamos nuclear facility of Iran, the design center, so that special forces won't be able to go in and blow it up or make it more difficult to blow up with missiles and rockets. But to suggest that nothing is going on there is defying the satellite photos that have been published in the news over the last couple of days. So they're playing a game, a dangerous game, and saying that they're going to make it a region-wide war if attacked and go after Americans at American bases, of which there are over 20. The most important one, of course, is in Qatar, and that's where CENTCOM has a headquarters. But we also have the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. We have bases in Oman where the negotiations are taking place, let alone Iraq and Syria. And we've established some bases in Central Asia as well so that we could get closer to Iran if need be. And one of those places is Turkmenistan, which is right on the border of Iran. And we've got a carrier strike group already there, and another one may be sent this week to the Middle East to back the negotiations. Negotiations were also not just about nuclear weapons. They were about 5 things. First is nuclear weapons, no nukes. The second is no nuclear enrichment, which enables the building of nuclear weapons once you've enriched to a certain level. And they were getting close to that level. And there's a question over about 400 kilograms of enriched uranium, whether or not we did destroy it during those raids. And they won't allow International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors in, UN agents in a nuclear watchdog that I used to work for, to go check to make sure that there isn't any funny stuff going on. And they've said that they won't let them in because it's too dangerous for them to go in there because there's unexploded ordnance. I'm sure that the Iranians are really interested in the safety of the IAEA inspectors more than protecting what may be down there. But that's what they're saying publicly as they fill in the entrances to all their nuclear facilities with sand so nobody can go in and blow it up in any raids. That's interesting. And the third thing that's of interest, ballistic missiles. They have a lot of ballistic missiles as well as drones that are an existential threat along with nuclear weapons to Israel. And that's why Bibi Netanyahu came to Washington for the seventh time during this administration to talk with President Trump. Trump has been in office 13 months, and Bibi Netanyahu has visited him in Washington 7 times.
Wow.
It's almost like the relationship between Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt in terms of an alliance, but this one being in the Middle East, of course. And they are close friends and allies. But Bibi wants to get across that, if you're not going to take care of the missiles and the proxies, which is the fourth thing that they need to worry about after nuclear weapons, enrichment, and ballistic missiles, the proxies that have been attacking Israel for the last 4 years and beyond include Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, right?
Right.
Those have to be up for discussion too. And last but not least, oh, by the way, stop killing your own people in the streets who want regime change because, that's not right either. So economically, we're also concerned about Iran selling oil to China. And you'll notice a theme in foreign policy here. We don't want Venezuela to sell oil to China. We don't want Iran to sell oil to China. We want to prevent China from acquiring strategic minerals and oil at a cheap price so that they can keep their economy going, which does what? In turn, feeds their military buildup, which includes nuclear weapons that have been modernized, which can threaten Taiwan. So there is a theme going here, and there have been extreme sanctions put on Iran, which has not helped their economy one bit, because the only thing that they can sell is oil, and that's under sanctions at the moment. They've been selling it under the table anyway,
Right.
and
Yeah, I heard about that.
that's a problem. But by not allowing them to sell oil, that keeps the pressure on their economy, which is really doing very poorly. As you know, their currency is essentially dead, and with the drought, they can't grow any food. They have to buy their food from overseas. That makes that too expensive, and the people are going hungry and don't have water coming to their homes. So the old, nobody does well on an empty stomach, and particularly authoritarian regimes. And so this is where people have some hope that the regime will collapse on itself, and all the threats that they're making in the region may be hollow, but we're being pretty hesitant on trying to test them, I notice. But we have put so much military hardware in the neighborhood and around it. We have long-range bombers that can come out of the United States itself, let alone Diego Garcia, which are out of the range of all of Iranian missiles. And we do have bases within the range, but we've reinforced them with Patriot and THAAD protective systems around bases, and we've reinforced our air wings. We have at least 3 squadrons of F-15s, which are the attack. They call them Eagles. So they're attack Eagles, and they can carry 5,000-pound bombs and standoff weapons that can do an awful lot of damage. And they wouldn't be there if they weren't being considered for doing that damage. What sort of damage would we be looking at? Well, the president would have options from very little to all the way, and he'd have to decide if he wanted regime change or if he just wanted to punish Iran. And that's the question that's on the table at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean it's when you're thinking about that, are the talks in Oman about progress, or are they just about Iran buying time?
Well, many people think it's about Iran buying time so that they can shift their stuff around and make it more protected. Plus, we know that China and Russia have sent planes full of equipment while these talks have been going on that have landed in Iran, and that would include more missile defense batteries and who knows what else. So the longer that the talks go on, the better that they can prepare for any potential attack. Israel is in this game too, namely that they're the ones that took the brunt of all the missile attacks over the last 4 years, not just from their neighbors, but Iran attacked Israel too, with over 1,000 missiles, most of which were shot down by the Iron Dome, but not all of which. And they still have a lot of missiles that they could fire and pass over to their proxies to do their dirty work. So I think Israel, at some point, if they see the United States dilly-dallying too long, and they see in their intelligence that Iran is ready to strike, I think they will preemptively go in before anything we do.
Right.
And there's also a possibility that we will go in together and let the Israelis take care of what they're worried about. We'll take care of what we're worried about, and share the burdens of the attack. That's possible too. But don't forget that Israel has the most to lose in terms of another nation outside of the Iranian people if this regime doesn't go down, because they've been under threat of it since 1979. And since 2005, they've been taking missiles that have been manufactured or paid for. That's 20 years, 21 years. How long would we put up with missiles coming into our territory for
Yeah, not that
21?
long.
No, I say that all the time in San Diego. What if Tijuana started shooting rockets into San Diego? How long would we wait before we flattened it? Well, the
5
Israelis,
minutes.
the Israelis waited until they were attacked on October 7th to flatten it in 2023. But they've had a long time of trying to negotiate peace, but it's hard to negotiate with proxies of Iran, all of whom have charters that say they want the destruction of Israel. How do you negotiate with a neighbor like that? You don't. And that's the point where we're at. So the issue becomes for Israel, either you cut the head off the snake, or else the proxies are going to come back and keep doing their dirty work, and Israel's still going to be under the threat of ballistic missile and nuclear attack. And they have 10 million people in Israel, whereas Iran has 90 million people.
Yeah. I remember that.
I mean,
didn't realize
and one nuclear bomb on Tel Aviv and Jerusalem takes out Israel so they're not going to allow that to happen. And they've had contingency plans since at least 2005 that I know of personally to do that, because they're just not willing to risk it, and they can't risk another Holocaust, a nuclear Holocaust, at the hands of people that hate them.
Yeah, it just wouldn't make any sense.
No, it wouldn't. And so they have to be a little more proactive than we do, because we're so much further away than they are from the problem.
No, I mean, it makes sense. Like, so, you know, Iran seems like it's testing us without attacking. So, how do you pressure a superpower like the US without firing a shot?
Well, it's a war of words, isn't it? And you have that, but you've seen an Iranian drone get shot down approaching the USS Abraham Lincoln. You've seen a couple of U.S. flag oil tankers get threatened by the Iranians in the Straits of Hormuz, and they asked it to slow down. It sped up instead, and had a U.S. warship by its side to escort it through the straits. So they're testing the waters and testing the defenses, while at the same time we're building up the military might there to reinforce the political talks going on in Oman. And I don't know if the president has decided yet to send another carrier group into the mix, which would really add more hardware and military presence to what is already pretty large presence, waiting for orders. But the shall we say, the tendency has been for the Trump administration, even before they bombed the nuclear sites back in June, to go and say, well, let's try and negotiate this and say, well, here's, we really want you to do this and that. If you don't, we're going to have to take action. Same thing happened with Venezuela. They
Right.
tried to talk Maduro out, and they also tried the same thing with Panama, and Panama gave in and into talks and so kicked the Chinese out. We hear another theme. The Chinese are getting interested in the Panama Canal. Well, they kicked them out and renegotiated a deal with the United States on what's going on there. So the pattern is there. Threaten to invade. Let's have some talks so that you can avoid that. And if you don't do what we want, we always reserve the right to use force.
No, I mean,
That seems to be the pattern here, but Iran's the trickiest one because it's in such a hotbed, a ticking time bomb, if you will, of an area called the Middle East that has ancient hatreds and not so ancient hatreds that are on the forefront of not just the news, but on everybody's mind who has family there.
right. No, I mean, I mean, Goldie Gamari, we've talked about her before.
Yeah.
She seems pretty convinced that the regime is going to come down.
Well, a lot of people say that, but the regime has had street protests in 2006, in 2009, in 2019, and 2022-23. And how have they fixed those protests? They killed their way out of them, and nobody from the outside helped, other than sanctions, economic sanctions. All right. And the economic sanctions have over time weakened the economy to the point where the people are really fed up. I've seen that now there are protests in the streets about the people who have been killed or arrested. Anybody who criticized the regime for killing protesters is now getting arrested. All the moderates, and they're being thrown into prison to be taken care of at a later date, at a later execution date. So the people are still upset, and I think more of the people are upset than some of the single issue problems of those other protests. One was over inflation, another was over the cost of fuel, another was over women's rights. They're now all coming together in a whole set of things now added on by you're killing us. What the hell? You guys got to go. So, it is a powder keg of both domestic and international interests that's about ready to explode. And the powder keg has started with the people in the streets themselves. It will end with the people in the streets themselves if they choose to overthrow the government. To the extent that we can help, we'll be taking out the people of oppression in Iran that are the organizations of oppression, and those are the morality police, the IRGC, the thugs, the Basij that go and shoot protesters on motorbikes, and all of that, and the mullahs, and ultimately the Ayatollah himself. But the question always comes after a regime collapses, what comes next? You have the Crown Prince Pahlavi, who the son of the former Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. His son is Reza Pahlavi. And he has come up with an interesting idea called the Cyrus Accords, where the Cyrus Accords relate to, of course, the first emperor of Persia, Cyrus the Great, who had a very tolerant regime of various religions, had a very successful empire that included prosperity as well as flexibility, and that's built upon, of course, the Abraham Accords, which are the three Abrahamic religions are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all descended from Abraham. And those accords in 2020 under the first Trump administrations included United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco as a way to improve Israeli-Arab relations. And so the Cyrus Accords are designed, according to the Crown Prince, to bring Iran into the discussion so that there can be peace between Arabs and Persians, as well as with Israelis, as was the case before 1979. Israel.
Yeah, no, I remember that. I remember. Well, I don't remember that. I remember reading that. I should say.
Yeah, you're not that old.
You know, is this more to me? It kind of, and this is just again outsider looking in type of person, right? It seems like the
Yeah.
perception matters more right now than the reality.
Well, the perception does matter. The reality matters too. And that's what we don't know all the realities, but let's just say that's what you have satellites for. And that's what you have intelligence agencies for. And that's what you have signals intelligence. You have human intelligence. You have Israeli intelligence, which is probably the best in the world in Assad, that knows what goes on. And they have recruited agents there for 46 years because there were a lot of Jews in Iran. And in fact, I met the chief of staff of the army in 2005, who was an Iranian Jew. He wasn't worried about anything except Iranian nuclear weapons, and that was in 2005. So that tells you the focus of the Israelis, as well it should be, because that's an existential threat. If you have a small country the size of New Jersey, it'll only take 2 or 3 nuclear bombs to destroy your whole civilization. And they realize that. And in fact, they've had something called the Begin Doctrine since 1991 when they attacked the Iraqi reactor outside of Baghdad called Ozark, because they were about to go online and build nuclear weapons. So they took it out. But that was the day before my first day on the job at the IAEA. As a graduate student, and it was a crazy place to be at after that, because IAEA, wasn't allowed in to inspect anything, and so the Israelis went in and did their own preemptive non-proliferation, as I call it. They also did that in 2007 against the Syrians that had a nuclear reactor with North Korean scientists helping them put it together. They took that out in September of 2007. And then, so this so-called Begin Doctrine, which started during, the attack of the Ozark reactor, June 6, when was that? 1991 was the catalyst for Israelis do not want to even risk even the possibility of any enemy coming up with a nuclear weapon, because they're such a small country that it would be devastating to them. And in fact, they have their own nuclear weapon, which they will neither confirm nor deny they have, but they have had it for probably 40 to 50 years. And they use that as a deterrent, a last-ditch deterrent against any attack of Israel. So you can imagine, if Israel has nuclear weapons, and if Iran were to get nuclear weapons, then Saudi Arabia has said, well, if Iran gets it, we're going to start building them too, because we have to. Because we have the Sunni Shia divide, which is also happening has happened in the Middle East, for centuries. 80 to 90% all Islam are Sunni Muslims, about 10 to 15% Shia Muslims. They have a different approach towards Islam, and they believe in different leadership styles. One believes you can choose a leader. That's the Sunnis. So that's started with Abu Bakr way back when. And then the Shia believe that it's divinely chosen by the descendants of Ali, that's who should lead the Shia population. And so they disagree on some fundamental facts, but they're still Islamic. That's you've got the Islamics, you've got those who believe that Iran should be, go back to the old Persian days of Zoroastrianism religion, where everybody's cool, and we'll just ignore that the Arabs invaded us in the 7th century. And then you have those who just would like to come into the modern world. Some are communists, some are not. Some are just kids who want to go to college and have families of their own, just like anywhere else. So it's complicated place, complicated business, and it's now all coming to a head in one of the historic moments for Iran and the Middle East.
No, I mean, it definitely seems like it. When you're looking at that, right, there's a lot of complicated things going on, especially, the history. I mean, this area's been a hot topic forever.
Yeah.
What's the smallest misstep that the United States could make that would turn everything sideways fast?
I think the U.S. is unlikely to make a misstep. I think the misstep is going to come from Iran, or it could come from Israel that is too nervous to wait to get attacked. I think Iran, if it thinks it's going to get attacked, could make the misstep of going after the USS Abraham Lincoln, and then they will learn very quickly that that would be a big mistake, and this would start things going, to say the least. A lot of things will start to blow up, and Israel is prepared to jump in at a moment's notice, and certainly has been sharing intelligence with the U.S. and back and forth. So we're in close contact. If you haven't noticed, he's been there 7 times in the last 13 months. So there's a reason for that, and I think the U.S. Is not going to make a misstep. The misstep will come from Iran if it starts.
It's that was actually going to be my follow up question for you.
Well, I beat you to it.
It, if these negotiations work, which they seem more, I don't know what, it's very
No,
up
they're
in
not
the
going to
air.
work. They're not going to work, my friend. It's one of those. Do you feel lucky, punk?
Right.
I've got this 457 Magnum that is called the U.S. military pointed at you. And do you really want me to keep negotiating with you, or you just gonna go away? It's one of those kind of moments. I'm not sure Clint Eastwood would appreciate the appropriateness of the parallel, but at the same time, it is the military pressure there is to get the Iranians to cave, and they said they only want to talk about nuclear. They don't want to talk about ballistic missiles or their proxies, and we're not talking about the people in the streets. So, and the nuclear thing, how much of it was already destroyed, and so we're discussing something that's already been destroyed. And why would you be doing that? To buy time to build up your defenses for the inevitable attack that's going to come from either Israel or the United States.
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
that. That's my view. They're buying time like they bought time before.
yeah. What was, God, I can't think of, was that with the Obama administration when they made the Iran deal? When they were trying to just
Yes,
kind
it
of kick the
was.
can down the road?
Well, yeah, it was. That's the way some people put it. It did stop their enrichment of uranium for a 5-year period, and it would allow inspections. And this was a deal that the Iranians signed with the Obama administration and Europeans and Russians. But the problem was it wasn't good enough for the Israelis, number one, because the Israelis thought that they were lying and they were secretly building nuclear facilities, which they found out about and released the information publicly. In fact, there was a Netanyahu came to the U.S. and gave this famous speech where he had this diagram of the bomb,
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
yeah, and the like. And he was saying, "Well, these guys are cheating, and here's the files that we found through our intelligence to prove it." And so the first Trump administration basically shelved the Iran nuclear deal. And then the Biden administration tried to bring it back and tried to renegotiate it, but was unsuccessful. But what the Biden administration did was to relieve the sanctions, took off the sanctions against Iran so that they could sell their oil to the Chinese. And that, in fact, helped finance not only their missile program, their nuclear program, but all the proxies that sat around Israel and the training and the missiles that were fired on October 7th and what have you. And the guerrilla warfare that was used was all paid for by Iran. So when Trump came back into, as 47, as president number 47, he said, well, we got to take that away again, and in so doing has brought the Iranian economy to where it's at a point of collapse. And this has taken many years over time, and the people have taken many years to get upset and go into the streets, at risking their lives by going into the streets. How many people would do that in your neighborhood
Not
or
very
my
many.
neighborhood? Not very many. And that's the way the Iranians have set it up for 46 years. They set up an industry of repression and an organizational chart of repression so that it's our way or the highway. And so when people take to the highway, they get assassinated for it.
I mean, you're not wrong. That's 1,000% spot on. God, who is it? Trying to think what I can't remember which reporter was essentially saying the same thing you were. Not in those words, but it was about that young woman that's been on the news that was executed. Yeah, I think that they found.
For not wearing a hijab in 22,
Yes,
23?
yes.
Yeah,
Drawing a blank on
Masra.
her name. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
Masra Amira, I think. But she was taken into a morality police station and murdered for not wearing her hijab. And that's when protests the women's protests happened in 2023. Women's Freedom Now protests, I think it was called. Those two were put down brutally. But it was yet another chink in the armor that has happened since the protests began, and it really started in 2009.
Oh yeah. I mean, wasn't there one in 2006 as well? If I'm thinking off the
Yeah,
top
there
of my
was
head.
one there.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. The thing is, if the people are in the streets willing to risk their lives, that says something about the the system that they're organizing against, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It says that they're creating a certain milieu, a certain hierarchy of privilege for those who are in charge and not those who get the work done. And
Yes.
it's a theocracy based on extreme Sharia law that was created during the 7th century. So they don't want to move beyond the 7th century in terms of social mores. And if you don't want to move beyond the 7th century in social mores, you're not going to allow both men and women to work, have the same rights, let alone have the right to vote for changes. It's all divinely chosen by the Ayatollah in charge. It has to approve all the candidates for any elections. And for those who disagree, we'll just arrest and hang from cranes or shoot them, whatever
Makes
whatever
sense.
the Ayatollah wants today. I mean, it's a it's a horribly repressive system that has been in place for 46 years. And the way it's stayed in place for 46 years is through brutal repression.
Yeah. I mean, that's what everybody says. I mean, that's their number one
And the
way of
fact that
staying
they
in
want
power.
to export this, throughout the Middle East,
It's
and
insane.
it is, well, it's not only insane. You can understand why Israel is coming to Washington every other week to say, "Don't forget that this is existential threat to us. Don't forget this. Don't make a deal with the devil if the devil's going to attack Israel."
Right? No, I mean, you're not wrong at all. They,
Yeah.
what was it? God, I'm trying to think. When you're looking at that, right? So is the media outside of you, are they getting this
Well,
wrong? Because I mean, obviously some media is always biased, right? But I'm just curious, are they getting it
well,
wrong or
I don't think it's getting it wrong. It's just that there's such scant attention paid to it in terms of background and context. How many podcasts do people listen to every night on TV? You get 20 minutes plus weather. And here in San Diego, the weather takes 10 minutes and it's always sunny. So you've wasted another 10 minutes. And then there are ads. So how much news can you get? You're going to have to move from somebody got kidnapped in Arizona to a dog got run over on the Ive to, yeah, the price of avocados is too high because the cartels are dumping it into California and forcing California avocado farmers out. And let's not forget about Canada that has just done a deal with China. You see, it's the way I would describe it is, look, a chicken journalism. Look, a chicken journalism. Look, there's another chicken. We've got to describe the chicken. And then another chicken comes out of the coop over here. We got to describe that chicken. And so as a result, people are really busy. They have to make a living and they have to put food on the table and gas in their cars. They want to have some idea what's going on in the world, but the most important one is their neighborhood. And then comes the state, then the nation, and then, oh, are we going to go to war? What does that mean? And why would we go to war? Where is Iran anyway? It's way over there in the Middle East. Oh, they've been doing that for thousands of years. Why should we even bother? And
Yeah, I
so,
mean, it's
to what degree can the press cover this well without going into it in some detail? And there are some programs that have done well in describing the background and context of this, but there are some stations that see it one way and other stations see it another way, and so who are you to believe?
right.
And you feel for the Iranian expats. There are millions of them here in the United States and elsewhere who would like to be able to go back to their country and not be shot. And they have relatives there that they'd like not to be shot and have a future just like we have here in the United States. But it's so hard and so complex. There are 2,500 years of Iranian history. There's a good book that just came out about the Shah called The King of Kings. I'm reading it now by Scott Anderson, and and the subtitle is The Iranian Revolution: A Story of Hubris, Delusion, and Catastrophic Miscalculation. And so it goes into some of the history behind Iran, including the Shah of Iran in particular, because the King of Kings means the Shah al-Shah, which was in Persian means the King of Kings or of Emperor of Iran. In fact, when I was young and getting interested in international affairs, I had a paper route. And that paper route, I earned money and I bought baseball cards and comic books, but I also bought this little coin because I didn't know that there was still an empire out there. And this guy the Shah called it an empire of Iran. And I bought this coin of him that was
Nice.
celebrated in 1971 at the biggest party ever held in the history of all kind, and that was the 2,500-year anniversary of the creation of the Persian Empire. And the Guinness Book of World Records says it was the most expensive party ever thrown. This coin was made in 1971 as a result of that celebration. I just found it interesting, and little would I know that I would become involved in the Middle East in my professional career. And I thought about that today when we were going to do this podcast. So I had to pull this out, show you how long I've been interested in it. And that was made in 1971 while the Shah was still in power.
And I mean, I didn't really think about it like that. God, I didn't even know that he still called it an empire.
Well, he called himself the King of Kings, with the shadow of God, the light of the Aryans, and all of these titles were thrust upon the emperor. He created an empress that had never happened until 1967. His third wife he made empress, Farah, and she's still alive, by the way. She's 86 years old and lives in Potomac, Maryland, and was interviewed for this book I just showed you. And the author Scott Anderson has written for the New York Times Magazine. Is well-established author in the Middle East. Wrote something about Lawrence of Arabia that was quite good, and has a encyclopedic knowledge of the Middle East, and he writes well. So it's a very readable book and very timely, I might add. Just came out.
Hey, you can't beat that.
Yeah, lucky for him.
Right,
Lucky
perfect
for
timing.
him. Yeah, exactly. I think that if you find this interesting, and I find it fascinating and very important, why not read a little more about it?
Right. I mean, it
Rather
always
than
helps.
just waiting for somebody who's a newscaster who has a 21-year-old writing a script for him that has no knowledge of the Middle East has just picked it up off of Reuters or AFP, maybe do a little deeper dive like you do in your podcast, or read a book, or go to the Congressional Research Service online and look at a 10-page report on U.S.-Iranian relations, and you'd learn a ton of stuff that most people don't even think about. If you're interested, and looking for good sources, they're out there.
Yeah, no, for sure they are. As we kind of wind it down, there's one last question that I
Sure.
think really will get people is
Mhm.
what should the public be watching for over the next 30 days that might not be a headline that really in reality should be?
Well, I think they should look at what the Israelis are doing in terms of their preparations. If it looks like they're going to attack, that means they don't think the negotiations are going in the direction they want. If there is a second aircraft carrier added into the mix, that will take another 7 to 10 days to set up. So that would be there for adding more pressure, which means that there probably wouldn't be another attack for another, you know, 10 days to 2 weeks, and then we'll see. Or that could be a shell game to say, well, that's what we're doing, and we'll attack before then. If the Iranians send boats or drones in numbers at the USS Lincoln, that means the whole thing's going to start. Or if there are missiles shot at the Qatar CENTCOM base at Al Adid, I think that also indicates that there will be a start of hostilities. You might also pay attention. Are the protests going to come back to the streets? And if they do, that's another factor that could hasten a limited strike rather than a full-on strike, simply because they would want to help the protesters, and in so doing, help collapse the regime. We're looking at what ways to serve all of our interests: economic, political, and military. Economic involves oil, political involves democracy, and military means protecting all of our troops in the Middle East, as well as preventing threats to those troops from Iran.
No, I mean that makes total sense. Ron, I really appreciate you coming on. I think people are really going to enjoy this, especially because it's Iran's still dominating the news. It's just, that fire starter hasn't hit just yet.
Well, and I think people are afraid about looking at it because it doesn't look like it's solvable, and it looks like it's going to blow up. And it has already blown up by the people in the streets that have paid for their protests with their lives. And it's about to blow up again because Israel is not going to accept ballistic missiles and proxies threatening their border.
No, yeah, they definitely are not. I mean, I don't blame them if it was Canada doing it to us. I may feel the same way.
Yeah, or anywhere else for that matter. But Israel it's a small country, originally surrounded by enemies everywhere, until they made peace with Egypt in '79, with Jordan in 1994, and then the Abraham Accords in 2020 with 5 different nations. We look forward to a day where they could do that with Saudi Arabia, and maybe the Cyrus Accords with Iran, but we're not there yet. That's a pipe dream that has yet to be realized. Hopefully, can be, but we'll wait and see. And I think the next 30 days, you're right, going to be very important in the future of Iran and our relationship with them and the rest of the Middle East.
Yeah, no, I mean it's going to be very telling. Feels like
Yes.
we're who's got what on whose bingo's card this year.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there are bingo cards on, what sort of things are being said publicly.
Oh, yeah.
Involves nuclear weapons, or involve protesters, that involve ballistic missiles or proxies, then you know where it's coming from.
Yeah, no doubt. Ron, great. Again, thank you for being on. It's
Sure, my
and
pleasure.
I'm sure there's going to be some things boiling up soon. It generally doesn't take too much time.
No, that's true. If any of you want to learn more about these things, you can come to Oxford in July. I've got got a program that study at Oxford, July 7th, August 1. Take a look at learnthroughtravel.com and it'll describe it for you. But we give all points of view, and then we have 15 professors, not just one, that are all experts in their field, economic, political, and military, that talk about foreign policy, including the Middle East.
Well, I mean, can't beat that. I encourage you, especially if you want to do something like that, go for it. Ron's a
Yeah.
wealth of knowledge. He's an encyclopedia.
Well, thank you. I try my best, but it's because I'm impassioned by international relations and foreign policy, and I'm also very interested in people taking a middle ground, shall we say,
Yeah,
in
no.
in in this area, and that's why I enjoy coming on your program.
Yeah, we love having you on. I mean, it's always good, and the people love hearing it.
Well, thank you, Joe, and you have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.